So the first question I have for you is how did you become interested in working in animation?
So initially I got into animation through video games. I had started playing like Assassin's Creed in high school and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, I wonder, do they draw everything out? And then as I kind of went down the rabbit hole, I found out like what concept art was. And that was initially what kind of pulled me into the whole like idea of animation was concept art. So I went ahead after I graduated and applied to UTD uh, with a focus mainly wanting to like get better at concept art, which didn't pan out the way I thought it was. I realized I don't like drawing for other people like officially. And then I took my first animation course, and I also realized I didn't like animation. And here I was like questioning my whole like desire to go into art. And then I took my first lighting course, and that's when I was like, no, this is it. This is what I really like to do. And then from then on, I kind of branched into look development on my own mostly. And then like the rest is history.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Uh-huh.
I will say Assassin's Creed is one of my favorite video game
I
series.
love it.
So
You
I'm
know, no
glad.
matter what they put out, they will have my $60 if they put Assassin's Creed on it.
Oh yes, that's the way it is for me right now for the foreseeable future. And
Mhm.
for you as well, how did your time as an ATEC student help you out with pursuing your goals of working in animation?
In the beginning, I'm gonna be very honest, it was a little rough. I mostly kept to myself, working on like my own work and not really like interacting with the student body. Um, and there came a point where I was like wanting that sort of connection with people. And I was also making that transition from wanting to stay in 2D to 3D. And I started to meet, like hang out in the lab a little bit more. And through that, I met really passionate people that kind of their passion and excitement got me excited and gave me like the motivation to continue into 3D since I had no whatsoever prior like experience. Um, and like from then on, I basically would go into the labs all the time and like try to meet as many new people or like just try to connect. Like I know like we're all introverted in that place. So I know a lot of people are now like, oh, let's go meet friends or whatever. So basically like I tried to integrate myself more within the student body rather than isolating myself and like trying to be like a one hit wonder. I was like, no, like these people, they know more than me. So I'm going to try my best to learn from them in a respectable, manner instead of like badgering them or whatever.
It's good that you were able to make that transition to be more
Yeah.
social with people. I think that's something
Yeah,
that,
it's really hard.
oh yeah, that's something I had to deal with a little bit as well. Just like
Uh-huh.
you have to get your feet wet and then eventually just get more involved with
Yeah, like you
people.
find that like one person and then like that one person introduces you to a bunch of people and then it becomes
Exactly.
so much easier. Like that's like the one thing I felt like when I first started college, that was the hardest thing because like you see people who are already friends and you don't realize like, oh, I could also just like go up and talk to them and like see if we vibe, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, something where I've had to, I say, force myself to talk to people.
Yeah, yeah. No, sometimes you really have to. Like I remember there was a moment like I had never opened Photoshop in my life until like that first semester. And like there was a moment where I had accidentally switched like the Photoshop mode from like the classic to like a photography editing mode. And I was so confused. And like I had there was nobody I saw from my classes. And I had to go and ask a lab tech. And that was the most anxiety driven thing I have ever done. Like I was so terrified. But then like because I spoke to that lab tech, that person ended up becoming a friend a couple years later. You know, they're like, "Oh, I remember you," and I was like, "Oh, not my best days, not knowing how to open Photoshop."
Yeah. I think I know who you're referring to when you say that friend. Does her name
Uh-huh.
start with the letter K?
No, it's actually somebody who came
Uh,
before her, but
oh,
she
before
has
her.
an important part in my story too. It comes later.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely good. And just for you as well, since you've graduated from ATEC, what has your career
Mhm.
been like?
Uh, it definitely was hard. It was very unlucky actually because when we graduated 2 months later, the pandemic hit. So a lot of studios basically like closed down and locked in for the most part. There was not a lot of work for junior artists or starting out artists. And still think that there's not enough work out there for artists who are just starting out. I remember like every single day, like honest to God, like 20, 30, 40 applications every single day. I had an Excel sheet. By the end of 2020, it was like 300 plus jobs that I had applied to. And there came a point where like I felt like my work wasn't adequate enough because, you know, I was looking on ArtStation and I was looking on YouTube and like what are good look development portfolios? What are they supposed to look like? What are, you know, starting out artists supposed to look like? And I feel like I wasn't at that level just yet. So I did some self-assessment and was like, those people are good. I want to also be good. So I set like a 6 months time to really like rebuild my portfolio. Um, and like really critically think about like where I wanted my future to go into. Cause I was at a point where I was like, oh, do I go into lighting more seriously or do I go into look development more seriously? And I kept finding like when I was doing lighting projects, like, oh, like the shading here is so cool. And I would like deep dive into the shader and realize like, oh, my interest is still in shading more than it is in lighting. So I kind of revamped my whole portfolio, like from the resume to the ArtStation to the Vimeo, like ground up. Um, and I also like learned to like take my time and like not push myself as hard. I know I'm a very dedicated, persevering type person. Like if I have a goal in mind, I won't stop until I get it sort of person. And I realized like that's not healthy in the long term because you need your rest, you need to take care of your health, you need to exercise and drink water and do the whole like self-care routine. So that was another thing that like really impacted like me getting a job was like health issues, just because I wasn't very conscious of like how deep I was running myself into the ground. Um, so once I had gotten that under control and like revamped my portfolio and really thought about what I wanted, like to the point where I was like debating, like, do I want to go into animation still or do I want to go into games? And what skills do I need to pick up if I want to, you know, sway to either side? Um, so and then basically I started hearing back from a few small companies like here in Dallas, but they weren't exactly what I wanted. And I did a couple art tests, which were also like unpaid and like stressed, like it just stressed me out. So I basically took like this moment where I was like, okay, these are the last batch of applications I'm gonna send, and I'm gonna take like 3 months off. Like I can't handle it anymore. And then by the end of those 3 months, I basically was picked up by Nickelodeon initially, and then 2 weeks later, I was called by Disney. So a little bit of a wild story.
It's an incredible story of perseverance, I will say. Congrats to you for sticking
Thank
through
you
it.
so
I don't know
much.
how many people who would, and your story highlights the value of just taking time for yourself and really figuring out what
Yeah,
you want to do. I think that's
yeah,
undervalued by some people these days. Just if you take the
yeah.
time, it's gonna work out. Just some way.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Especially if you put in a lot of the hard work anyway. I know like there's lots of anxieties and worries about like getting a job after college and whatever. And I've noticed from my friends and like people that I see online as well that I keep up with, like other artists that I like, you know, it takes roughly about a year and some change if you're lucky to like land a job in a big studio or any studio for that matter. And especially like there's things like the fiscal year cycles and like just general like internship cycles and things like that, like we don't realize that these are what companies, that's the schedule that they're moving on, and like whenever you graduate may not be like internship season for example, or stuff like that. So there's small like nuances that are so out of our control that like we have to learn like not to like put that on ourselves, you know, like it'll come if you work really hard and you're very dedicated and you do the homework, like you're gonna make it, you know.
You're actually leading into the last question I have for you. So,
uh
besides what you've mentioned already, what advice would you share to college students?
um okay, the first, can I give a couple?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. The first thing is never, ever, ever compare yourself to somebody else. Like in terms of like, oh, they're so much better than I am. I'm never going to get there. you don't know how long they have been on that journey, right? Or on that path or on that like education, right? Like for example, I came into UTD with zero, absolutely no knowledge in Maya, no knowledge of Photoshop. I barely knew how to hold a tablet. Like that's the kind of like bare bones that I had. But I found myself always like comparing myself to those rock star students who were like creating these incredible ZBrush sculpts and like creating these incredible backgrounds and characters and things like that. And I was like, I can never get to there, you know? But how could I get to there? I just got to UTD. I just opened Photoshop for the first time. Of course, it's going to take time. So, like, be gentle with yourself and understand that stuff takes time. In 4 years, you will be that student that people look up to. So, and it's also not a competition. I know there's healthy competition where it's like, oh, I want to be better and push yourself, right? But there's also very negative connotations to that competition that you have to be very self-aware. Like, am I doing this just to put the other person down? Like, what are you competing against, you know? Another thing is be very conscious of your health. I cannot tell you how, like, you won't function as an artist or as a person in any industry if your health is suffering. That was like one of the hardest lessons I had to learn after I graduated, was take care of your health and take care of your body, because in the end, like, you will not be able to like keep up with these big boy artists and these big girl artists, like how fast they go. If you yourself on the inside are not okay, like if you're not feeling well or you have carpal tunnel or things like that, like all of that matters on the physical and emotional side. And then one more thing is, be self-aware. Be self-aware. Like, figure out who or what you want to do. And if you need to take time away from the work, away from the grind, do that. I used to work as a in the advising office. And basically I would work with students to help them figure out the path of like what ATEC path they wanted to go, like a student mentor. And I remember like talking to these students who had no idea what they wanted to do, but they just wanted to do art, or they liked the sound of animation, or they liked playing the games, or they liked watching the movies. And they were like, oh, I want to do that. But it takes a dedicated person to finish an animation, finish a game, finish an environment, you know, like there's a lot of steps, and it's not as easy as what we see on the screen. What we see on the screen is years and years of development and work. Can you handle the years and years of development at work, is what I'm trying to say. So take the time and understand like what you want to do. And even on a more like, if you know what you want to do, or if you know you want to go into animation, or if you know you want to go into games, you don't have to follow your friends into whatever like denomination that they're going into. Like if you're all your friends are lighting and you don't like lighting, don't go into lighting, do something different. If you know none of your friends know what they're doing, you need to take the time and watch out for yourself and figure out what you're doing. So just be a little bit like, just be self-aware, know where you're standing and know where your goal is, and do what you can to get to your goal in a very healthy and positive manner, you know?
It's wonderful that you shared all that,
Yeah.
practical and real. And
Yeah, for
oh yeah,
sure.
oh yeah, and I believe that people were going to take that advice honestly, because especially with things going on
Hopefully.
these days, we need that
Yeah.
realism.
Yeah, I'm not the type to like sugarcoat it, because like we were like, I know me and my friends, we were there like night after night in the labs working our butt off to get to where we are today. And thank God all of us now are successful in the areas that we want to be. But you know, nobody sees the ugliness, not the ugliness, but like the harder times. All you see is the pretty animation or the pretty title, you know, like people forget that, you know, we were all just students once upon a time ago, and like we were all like, I didn't know how to texture at some point, I didn't know how to light, I had no idea how to open Maya at some point. And people seem to forget that when, you know, you have this big fancy title. So it's like being self-aware and understanding that all of this takes lots of time and lots of dedication and perseverance, like, is super like, it helps put thing in perspective, you know, especially for people who want to just go go go. Like, slow down, you're gonna make it, you know.
What I will say though is I really enjoyed this interview.
Yay. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I had a good time too.
Oh, yes.